I'd like to say two things. Two people came up to me in the interval, and one of them said that in Islam, the earth itself is sacred. And the reason that the people of Islam are so angry with the West is that they can't bear to have these military bases put everywhere on it and war to be taking place in this sacred earth, so to speak. So that was interesting. That was something I didn't know at all. And secondly, someone came up and I think I need to emphasize that the qualities and things that I covered in the last section of the seminar, they are equally in men and women. And it's not something that's specifically to do with women. Although women may have developed some of them more than men, they're wonderful men like my own husband who have them fully developed. And I had to learn how to develop them myself because I didn't have them. That lunar landscape was me at the beginning of our marriage, and I've had to change all that through his sympathetic understanding, really. So I owe him a great debt there. So now we come to the marriage of mind and heart, conscious mind and instinctual soul. And I think we're now at the phase, we're just entering into this new phase in our evolution. I put final phase, but I'm sure it's not final. It's the phase that I call the stellar phase, as opposed to the lunar and the solar. We're really, I think, entering again into relationship with the cosmos, partly because of Hubble, which has showed us all those incredible images, and partly because we have to move beyond where we are if we're going to survive as a species. We just can't go on as we are. So I think that this is coming through in many thousands of people's consciousness all over the world. And I think we're in the midst of a process of giving birth. The collective psyche is giving birth with a great deal of travail and uncertainty, but something is coming through. I have messages from people in New Zealand and Australia telling me of dreams of people giving birth, even men giving birth. So this is something, as it were, is coming in the collective soul. And I think that the cosmos, at the deepest level of our being, I think it's urging us to take this next step, to move beyond this phase of duality and conflict into a conscious relationship with our cosmic source and ground. It doesn't need a new religion, but it may need a different image of God in order to carry this through. Nothing to do with gender, but something which is utterly beyond gender. So we carry within us these two different ways of knowing, and we're now moving into a third way. The supreme achievement of the solar era and its male-directed culture was the emergence of the conscious mind out of the matrix of instinctual behavior, and also the emergence of our sense of individuality and our rational mind. However, because the values related to the feminine experience have not really been recognized by our culture, they do not yet have the power to transform our present situation. They're not conscious enough. The values related to compassion, relationship, belonging, and oneness, they're still overridden by the old warrior values of the conflict between light and dark and good and evil, and the battle, as it were, against nature to wrest nature's secrets from her and use nature for our own uses. So these feminine values are still inarticulate in the culture as a whole and not fully conscious in either women or men. And because everything has become so fragmented and disconnected, these values are not able to function as they should, as a guide that would really take us back into relationship with the earth and the cosmos. But still, as I hope to show you, things are coming along. So this is a rather gloomy picture, which I was going to use originally for this seminar, and Jane said, no, please don't use that picture. It won't attract people at all. And this was painted around 100 years ago, the beginning of the 20th century, by Odilon Redon. And it really shows the consciousness, the one-eyed consciousness of Western civilization, which is looking down on this great field of nature where the woman's body is, split off from the feminine, split off from nature, and thinking that it can dominate and control what it doesn't really understand at all. So a radical imbalance has developed both within the psyche and within Western civilization as a whole. And today we have a one-eyed culture that's lost touch with the deep ground of life and with the deepest values that were carried by the image of the feminine. And as I say, these are carried by men. And if you think back on the heroism of men fighting for freedom, for justice, for the survival of a different group or even of their own family, there's something truly heroic in the male psyche there which needs to be acknowledged, which woman has not experienced to that extent and in that same way. She's experienced it differently with fighting to keep her children alive or keep them nourished and fed, but she hasn't actually done battle in society against all the forces that hold humanity back. If you think of slavery, if you think of Wilberforce, and the fight that Wilberforce and his friends, there was a small group of people, only 3 or 4 people in the beginning, when they started this movement to abolish slavery. And they had to fight the church, they had to fight Parliament, and that's a struggle that men are good at. They know what to do and how to do it, and they set about it in effective ways. This is something that women probably need to learn and probably will learn as time goes on. They certainly did it with the suffragettes. I was watching that program by Andrew Marr. Did anybody see it? About the suffragettes and the struggle they had to really, the rage that they had to encounter and stand up against was truly terrifying. Anyway, I have this lovely image and this saying. This is a Hasidic saying: when the moon shines as brightly as the sun, the Messiah will come. Do any of you know this? It's a lovely saying. And Messiah does not mean a new Jesus or a new Buddha or a new Muhammad. It means raising the whole level of consciousness of humanity. And when that point has been reached, and Kabbalists think it's just about to be reached, then humanity will suddenly move into this different phase when the masculine and feminine archetypes are united and when the feminine archetype can shine as brightly as the sun. It's a lovely image. Long ago, in an essay on women in Europe, Jung said that women were confronted with a great cultural task. Perhaps it will be the start of a new era, he wrote. And at a recent conference in Vancouver, His Holiness the Dalai Lama astounded the audience by saying that the world would be saved by the Western woman. Women, he said, are the architects of change. I think this is something, I've heard this, and many emails have been sent to me about this. Obviously, it struck a very deep chord. And there is a group of women, which I might recommend to you, a website called Women at the Edge of Evolution. I think it's called WEE for short, we.com, Women at the Edge of Evolution. And they've been broadcasting once a week. You get them here on Sunday, the broadcast of distinguished American women who are at the forefront of this evolutionary movement. Very interesting to listen to because it actually helps one to concretize where one is and to realize that something is definitely happening. But women can only do this, what the Dalai Lama has suggested or said that would happen. I think women and men can only do this if we don't try to copy the male model that's currently offered by the culture, which is still transfixed in solar mythology and still offering the thing of achieving, driving ambition, competing with others, pushing others out of the way. I mean, look at the bankers. It's just, the whole model is not something that women really want to copy. So how do we formulate a new image of feminine for both men and women, that men can be not tied to this terrible, stressful image of what they have to do and have to achieve, and women can really discover in the depths of themselves the values that have been so trampled on for so long. And this is very important. Women have to stand up to the power of the masculine within their own psyche so that it doesn't overrule and violate their feminine nature. This is something that my own animus taught me, and I had a terrible struggle with a very negative animus inside which said, oh, no point you're doing anything, you're worth nothing, and might as well not bother. And very, very strong. And
you're too stupid anyway.
Yes, you're stupid, you're not clever enough, you're not this or that enough. But men have it too. Men have a very difficult inner critic that they need to address as well. In therapy this comes up quite often.
I think men have a stereotype of what masculinity is about.
Yes, it's because they've been told.
Destructive.
Yeah.
Which can be destructive, doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be. No, exactly. But when you think they've had to, first of all, they had to follow the hunt, they had to really obey the group thing of getting enough meat to eat, then they had to be the warrior, and we've had distinguished philosophers, scientists, etc., but there's tremendous competition always between scientists, between philosophers, and as you can see, nobody can agree on climate change. You have one group of men saying one thing, another saying another, and you don't know where you are. And I think this confrontation is very much in the male psyche, not being sure of themselves enough to agree with another male. It seems to come through very strongly now, anyway. And also, of course, in politics, and how they try to destroy each other in politics.
So when now a woman comes into the equation as an intellectual power as well, how threatening is that?
Yes, well, this is what's happened, but I think it's moving now because women are beginning to think quite deeply about whether they really want this model to follow. And many women are working in this field to help other women, I think, already. So I think
the feminist stereotype is an invention of men anyway, to a large extent, I think.
Well, it was copied by the feminist movement, but I think probably they had to do that in order to establish the fact that women should have equal wages with men and that there should be women in politics, etc., which is important and necessary. But they went over the top with it and became caricatures of men, some of them. And of course that upset men, and because if women are not really sure in their feminine self, men are distressed and disoriented themselves. They can't be men properly. And that is a big problem now. Anyway, I think what's coming up now, the masculine can work with the partnership with the feminine within the psyche. And men and women can develop a true partnership instead of trying to compete with each other. I think the deepest need of both men and women is to connect with the evolutionary impulse that's helping us to become conscious of our new role in relation to the planet. Because this is a new thing altogether. We have to think of the planet for the first time. We have to put our own needs on hold and think, what are we going to do to help the planet to get through this stage of climate change or global warming? Because our own survival actually depends on the survival of the planet and how well it's able to function. So there's a feeling now we're part of something greater again. In the ecological movement, we've really discovered a new spiritual role, if you like, which is getting stronger all over the world as young people come up and take their place in life. But I think now we need to reconnect with our heart and with the deep resources of wisdom within ourselves and reconnect with our deepest instincts. And here I've just kind of made a kind of summary of what I've talked about, the images connected with the feminine. Not everything is here, but we have the moon, the sea, very important, water, the mother, the earth, nature and the body, the heart and the right hemisphere of the brain, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and then the vessel, the rose, which has always been an image of wisdom going right back, the lily and the dove, and then the circle or sphere. So I just thought I'd kind of recapitulate. That image of the vessel on the right is an alchemical image of the queen, the lunar queen, which is ready to receive the light of the sun, as it were, in the psyche. The preparation has been done to receive the light of the sun.
What's the labyrinth?
The labyrinth is the connecting pathway between this world and the other world. And it's also the labyrinth of the psyche, finding your way through the psyche.
That image of the heart on the previous screen, how far back does that particular heart-shaped image go? Are you aware?
I have no idea.
Does it go back farther than Victorian?
Yes, it goes back to medieval times because there are lots of tapestries which show the knight presenting his heart to his lady.
And before that?
Before that, can anybody think of anything before that? Yes?
The shamanic lineage that I have worked with coming from Peru associate the shape of the heart with the womb.
With the moon?
The womb.
With the womb?
Yes.
Yes, with the uterus. Yes, of course. Yes, how interesting. Fascinating.
But also, isn't there in Egypt, the tawf and weighing the heart?
Yeah.
Isn't it weighing the heart?
Yes, there is weighing the heart. Maat. Yeah. Osiris, yes.
Yeah.
Michael, do you know anything about weighing the heart? No?
I feel that.
Certainly.
I mean, you get images of it.
Against the feather.
The heart being in the balance. But then I
against
don't
the
remember that there's a particular shape to that heart.
No, I don't either, but it's a very interesting comment. So this is my husband's painting, and he is deeply introverted artist who never discusses anything at all, not even his painting. I make no comment on his painting. I've had to learn that many years. But here he's painting this new thing that's emerging, this new thing that's breaking through. So I think there's a growing global movement now towards a new world order which will consider our needs in relation to the needs of the earth and our service of it. There's a growing awareness that we must free the world from nuclear weapons and address the dangerous levels of carbon pollution arising from our industrial culture and affecting the very stability of our planet. But for this major shift in consciousness to occur, the feminine principle has to be honoured at all levels of human life. Marie-Louise von Franz, who was one of Jung's closest colleagues, wrote, "Transformation is always impossible when the feminine principle of eros is missing or is too weak." And it has been too weak until now, but I think it is getting stronger. But I think also the present chaos is a sign that the old order is disintegrating. And we have to trust the process which is taking us through this disintegration. It's happening because the old values no longer suffice. In the language of alchemy, the old king is dying. And the old religious orders offer no insight into what is taking place, nor any real solution to it. I was thinking of, in relation to Afghanistan, you can see the conflict there between the heart, the feeling of the terrible sacrifice of these young men and women, and then the political values which say we have to achieve our goal. We have to define our goal and pursue victory. That word victory comes in quite a lot. And that's the old solar mythology speaking, because it's tied into the individual nation, and the individual nation that has to hold its own, as it were, in this world of embattled nations. Everything is seen in terms of increasing one's own power in relation to other nations which have power, or joining up with a nation which is more powerful in order to be protected. And this brings up the whole renewal of Trident, which I'm very concerned about. I don't think Trident should be renewed, but it has to come from below this impulse. It can't come from the political party that's in power, because they are in power in order to protect the safety of the people, and they can't abandon that role. So it's got to come from people saying, this is not the way we want to go. And you can think back on the Greenham Common women and how strong they were in resisting the bombs that were being put on their bases, on the base at Aldermaston. So there are ways of resisting this and making it more conscious, really. People often say, oh, well, I can't do anything about Trident, I just have to leave it to the politicians. But you can't leave it to the politicians, because they really depend on us to actually speak out.
But could it be that the return of the goddess maybe comes as the return of the terrible mother first, before the loving good mother can reappear again? As all this chaos going on, maybe representing the chaotic and terrible part of the goddess?
Well, I don't know that one could identify it with the terrible part of the goddess. It's more that disintegration has to come, chaos has to come before there can be renewal. It's the death before the regeneration, if you like. But I wouldn't associate that specifically with the image of the goddess, although in the past it has been, but I don't think that would be right to do that now. It's more of an alchemical process that's taking place, and I would associate it more with alchemy and the dying of the old king, or the old value system, and also the old image of God which has presided over Western civilization for nearly 3,000 years.
And could you possibly just repeat the piece about transformation can only happen?
Yeah, transformation is always impossible when the feminine principle in brackets eros, is missing or is too weak. That's from a book which I thoroughly recommend, which is called Jung, His Myth in Our Time, by Marie-Louise von Franz. So here I brought the picture of the Sleeping Beauty, which is my favourite fairy tale and always has been. And here is really something that has been asleep for a very long time, which is now beginning to awaken. You know the whole story about how she was put to sleep when she pricked her finger on the spindle.
Is that a pre-wrote novel?
Yeah, it's Burne-Jones.
Jones.
Yeah, it's in a house in Oxfordshire. Somebody murmured something over there. What was it?
I said the spindle of the old witch.
The spindle of the old witch. Well, this is the lunar symbol again. The old witch is the dark of the moon, and this is the crescent moon, which has, so to speak, been asleep during the dark phase, and she's now going to come back to life again. So there's the old lunar, and the prince who's standing on the left here with all the other princes who've died on the hedge of thorns. The prince stands for the solar principle, and that stands for our rational consciousness. And then the lunar princess stands for the feeling values, and he needs to connect with those in order that this marriage can take place, and that the whole court will then awake, which is the whole court of humanity.
Sounds serious.
Lovely. Yes, it is, yeah. It's much darker. I'm afraid I've taken artistic license with it in order to get it light enough, because they haven't ever been cleaned, so they're covered with very yellowy varnish and very dark. But there's I think there's 6 of them altogether. So I think this hedge of thorns, to me, are 2 negative beliefs we've inherited that are really deeply injuring our heart. One is the belief that I've gone through, that we are guilty and contaminated by sin. And the other is the belief from science that we are separate and alone in a lifeless universe. So I would say those are the 2 beliefs which have created this hedge of thorns. And like that prince, we have to find our way through. And by the way, it says that when the right prince comes along, the hedge of thorns turns to roses. And he just passes through, which is a lovely image, I think. So I've done this kind of diagram of reuniting these solar and lunar dimensions of the soul, reuniting the prince with the sleeping beauty, and the head with the heart, thinking with feeling. And also the visible, the world that we know, with the invisible world that we can't see, the world of spirit which underlies our physical world. Is that long enough for you to? No? Right.
Is this on your website?
No. No, it isn't, unfortunately. Well, it may be, but I can't remember where. Where it is.
Is the Stella the transcendent of those 2 things?
I think it's the union would lead to the birth of the child, so to speak, and that child would be stellar consciousness.
Across that book called My Stroke of Insight.
No.
It's your physiologist lady, her brain.
Oh, yes, I was going to mention her, yes.
It's fabulous.
Yes.
The little chapters go through the right and the left-hand side of the brain
Right.
with her experience.
Yes.
And she calls...
Can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll make it loud. There was this woman, a neuroscientist, about 2 years ago, who had a stroke to the left hemisphere of her brain. What was her name?
It's on the website.
Yeah, it's on the website. Anyway, she found that she couldn't speak except to sort of make noises into the telephone to ask for help. But she found that she opened to this extraordinary feeling of oneness and unity through her experience of the right hemisphere of the brain. And she realized that the left hemisphere had blocked off this experience. It's very, and she's now written a book about it. Joy, her name was, Joy something or other. Yeah.
It's on TED Talks.
It was on TED Talks, that's right.
What's the name of the book?
My stroke of insight.
My Stroke of Insight. My Stroke of Insight. It would be well worth getting. I was going to come to the left and right hemisphere in just a minute.
But she
And-
calls it the head and the heart.
Does she?
So when she gives her experience of what was the right and what was the left, she calls that one the heart and that one the head.
Okay, so she called these two hemispheres the head and the heart in her, when she writes about this in her book. I want to mention just at this point then another book which somebody, David Lorimer, told me about just 2 days ago. I think you'd like to write this down. It's called The Master and His Emissary. The Master and His Emissary. It's about the two brain hemispheres. And it's by a man called Ian McGilchrist. That's,
On the radio this morning.
was he?
Yes, he's being interviewed on.
Oh, well, David said I must get it immediately because, and I usually do what he says, so I've ordered it already. Anyway, his name is spelled M-c and then big G-I-L and then C-H-R-I-S-T, McGilchrist. He's a psychiatrist, apparently.
And that's also about the two parts of the brain.
Yeah, two hemispheres of the brain.
He was saying that we're losing our access to the right.
To the right.
We're so focused on the left that everything, our whole lives now are so technologically.
Yes.
That we're losing that, we're in danger. We're just not focusing on that side and becoming sort of less.
Yes, can I repeat what this lady has said, that this man who's written the book has said that we've developed the left brain so much with our technology and our emphasis on the intellect that we've lost our connection to the right brain. And this, I think, is what this woman realized at the same time.
Do you think this is now there's a bigger and bigger number of children with dyslexia, all sorts of, what we call learning difficulties? Do you think that's a compensation?
It could be. It could be. But it could be that my grandson is a problem like that, and it could be that the left hemisphere has been in some way, my husband also is dyslexic, and I think that it could be that the left hemisphere is in some way impaired. It should be much more, functioning properly, but something's gone wrong. I don't think it's a compensation. I think it could be due to the chemicals in our environment, something like that, more likely. Can I go on to the next one?
Just as a homeopath, I've seen a lot of change in personality and autistic symptoms after vaccination.
Really?
It happens quite often.
After the first vaccination, the earliest one.
The MMR is the one that seems to cause the greatest degree of distance from
Yes.
personality changes.
Right.
Children can be perfectly okay.
Yes. My grandson hasn't had that injection, much to the fury of all the teachers and doctors and everything.
Has actually been disproved. I mean, they kind of take.
You can't believe it. It's a state in science.
Yes.
About the brain shift.
That's her experience. So you can't discount it.
It's not to be proved or disproved.
It's just her experience.
My experience in that.
Okay, I think we mustn't get into that particular argument. I think I'm going to go on to the next thing. This is a picture, one of my favourite pictures, of an embryo at 21 days. This is what we all look like at 21 days in the womb. And there you see the heart. And the two hemispheres of the brain are coming really out of the heart. That they develop out of that. And the right hemisphere develops first. The right hemisphere is really the connection to the heart. And the left hemisphere apparently develops slightly afterwards. And in the evolutionary sense, the right hemisphere was established long before the left really began to function. It was there, but it wasn't really functioning. This is in Leonard Schleyn's book. It's quite complicated. I've written here, through the right hemisphere of the brain, which is the first to develop out of the heart, we are connected to the heart. But if the left hemisphere comes to overrule the right, that connection can be impaired or broken. And more is being discovered now about the importance of the heart. just had a bit about Leonard Schlein, which I wrote down. Yes, this is Leonard Schlein speaking. He says, the right lobe of the fetus's brain is well on its way to maturation before the left side begins to develop. The old, wise right side, more familiar with the needs and drives stemming from earlier stages of evolution, can be better relied to negotiate with them than the younger left side. The right hemisphere integrates feelings, recognizes images, and appreciates music. It is non-verbal and has more in common with earlier animal modes of communication. More than the left, it expresses being, wholeness, and feeling states. He also writes, it is the portal leading to the world of the invisible. It is the realm of altered states of consciousness, where faith and mystery rule over logic. Then I said here, mention the neuroscientist who had a stroke. So we've done that. And it's interesting also that women have between 10 and 33% more neuronal fibers in the forward part of the corpus callosum, that's the bridge, as it were, between the two hemispheres, than men do. And therefore they have a greater integration between the two sides. Men have more focus. They had to learn focus because of the hunt. And women focus more on gathering, doing the tasks which were related to gathering. And even now, when women go shopping, it's mainly the women who go shopping. The men don't like shopping on the whole. And it's that gathering sort of impulse which is there. And it's probably because of these neuronal fibers which are connecting the two. And also the lateral thinking that women find more easy than men. Men are much more focused and directed. And women sometimes find a great difficulty doing that kind of thinking. So I thought that was interesting, really.
One of the things is that we all, men and women, have more senses for emotion around our heart than we have in our brain.
Yes, I'm just coming to that, because that is absolutely fascinating.
Which connects with why is it shaped by the same kind of question.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
Well, maybe, I don't know why, but I think more and more has been discovered. This is actually the communicating paths. So this is a book written by Servan Schreiber, and I think it's called Beyond Prozac or something like that. Anyway, I found that diagram in it, which shows the relationships, the connecting pathways between the heart and the brain, and how the sympathetic nervous system, which I didn't realize until I saw this diagram, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system is the communion, as it were, the channels which connect the heart and the brain. And there's a constant two-way dialogue going on with each organ constantly influencing the other's function. Now, even today, my heart is functioning well because I feel I'm in a nice, receptive group. Therefore, my brain is working better. I can think more clearly. I haven't stumbled over my words very much. I haven't got, forgetfulness, and I remember things. And all that is because my heart is happy. And I think this is so important for children, that they're happy in what they're doing. Then their brain will function. It's not the other way round. So I thought this was quite interesting. And almost a century ago, Rudolf Steiner said that the greatest discovery of the 20th century would be that the heart is vastly more than a pump, and that the great challenge of coming ages would be to allow the heart to teach us to think in a new way. I think that's amazing, fascinating. So this is what this part of the seminar is all about, really. It's reconnecting with the heart. And even if you are frightened or something is worrying you at night, if you just lay your hand on your heart and just rest it there and speak to the heart and let it speak to you, this is terribly important. And I'd like to give you the website. It's called Institute of Heart Math, all one word, instituteofheartmath.org. There's masses there on the heart, very interesting material. And here, from that website, I found this wonderful diagram of the electromagnetic field of the heart. And this apparently envelops every cell of the body, and it surrounds the body to a distance of 12 to 25 feet. encompassing radio and light waves, which are the principal source of information upon which the body and brain build our neural perception of the world. So below the level of consciousness, there's a neural perception going on, which is coming actually from the heart. And I think it could be that this is our connection to the environment, which obviously did come through, feeling connected. I think that's a wonderful picture. I think a really exciting picture. I'll just read you a few more things, really. It produces 2.5 watts of electrical energy at each pulsation and creates an electromagnetic field identical to the electromagnetic field around the Earth. So perhaps in this room, think of all our electromagnetic fields extending out 12 to 25 feet and probably creating a wider field going out from the room and so on and so forth into the city and on into the nation. And, we can really connect with this field, I think, with our imagination.
I wonder whether that changes its quality depending on what we are feeling. So, for instance, if that person is full of fear, if that electromagnetic spectrum would maybe change its frequency.
Yeah, well, this would be...
If it's full of love, then it would do something.
It would magnify, probably.
Yeah.
Yes, it would be interesting. There would be something...
Physical version of transference.
Yeah, I think it would be an explanation of transference. Yes, I think it would. Yes. And if it's an electromagnetic field, I think that it would be really like a vibrational field.
Because you can interrupt a magnetic field quite easily and get it reflected in the next one. It's how the best gramophone, showing my age, the best record players work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, the magnetic field produced by the heart is more than 5,000 times stronger than the field generated by the brain. So we've put all our attention onto the brain and missed this very important part of ourselves. So I think that, as I said before, there are direct neural connections between the heart and the limbic or older brain system. That's the mammalian brain, the animal brain, which has this great experience, far older than our human experience. The animal experience goes back countless millennia into the past, and the reptilian even before that. And these connections go up further, apparently, into the prefrontal lobes, into these lobes here, which are not fully developed. We've only developed the lower half of the prefrontal lobes. Changing the emotional state of the heart affects the neurological connection between the heart and the brain, and vice versa. And changing the information flow from the heart to the brain can influence brain performance and lead to increased mental clarity and heightened intuitive awareness. And if you feel that people are with you rather than against you, that can heighten your perception, your ability to perceive, and your intuitive sensibility. I'm quite sure about that. So we don't realize that we're connected through this invisible heart field to the energy body of the earth, what used to be called the soul of the world. I think the splitting of the atom deeply injured the fabric of life, deeply injured the heart, if you like, and all the developments that have come from that, including nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, have magnified this injury. You might say that it broke the heart of matter, and this affected all of us in our cellular structure, as it were. But as our culture is so disconnected from the earth, this is not something that would be even considered, let alone tolerated by the powers that be.
This would explain proprioception, wouldn't it, when you sense something that you can't
Yeah.
see? And I suppose that might come from when you needed to know that there was a tiger going to jump on you or something.
Yes.
It entered your field.
Yes, it entered your field of awareness, your sensory field. I was going to say something else then, I can't remember what it was. No, it's okay. Can't remember. So I wanted to come to alchemy, really, in this alchemical marriage of Sol and Luna, and the king and the queen. Because the alchemical tradition holds that the image of the marriage between these two elements, these two great archetypes, not only refers to our own human nature, but also to the marriage of consciousness with its ground. The queen in alchemy being the image of that invisible ground, and the king the image of the reborn or regenerated consciousness that can unite consciously with it. If I'm going to give a seminar next April 24th, on alchemy in this building, if anybody wants to come, when I'll go into this much more deeply. But I just want to mention that here, that the alchemists knew that there was a deeper ground to matter than what the culture knew about. And they were working with that deeper ground, with that consciousness which was hidden within nature. And this was the king that they were trying to bring forth, the young king, what they call the young king, was the reborn consciousness or regenerated consciousness that was able to perceive this deep ground within matter. The old king, and also the old image of God, could not perceive it, could not take it in, as it were.
It's not clear to me who the king is and who the queen is in that picture.
You're not clear. The king is on the right and the queen is on the left, and there's the moon beneath her feet and the flaming fire of the sun, and the sun is over his head on the right. And she's wearing the white lunar robe and he's wearing the red solar robe.
But the sun is dark.
No, it's just, I'm afraid it's just the way it's come out. On my picture here it's much lighter. Yeah, it's lighter. It looks much more maroony in the picture, I'm afraid. And so I've put here also in the Christian tradition, we have this beautiful image from a church in Rome, about 12th century, one of the earliest images of the union of the two archetypes. And Mary there is his mother, but she looks like his bride. So who knows what was carried into that picture by the artist who did it. He says, "Veni electa mea," come, my elect, to her. This is very Byzantine in feeling, of course. But it's there in the Christian tradition, and it's carried through. All the artists of the Renaissance were painting this marriage all the time. And yet it wasn't in the actual teaching of Christianity. So it was coming up through the artist and through the poet. And I think, in fact, the artist, where would we be without the artist in all these 25,000 years of images that I've shown you? If there hadn't been the sculptor, if there hadn't been the painter, we wouldn't have known all of this. There would have been no evidence until writing appeared on the scene.
It might be Mary Magdalene, who in the Gnostic Gospels
It could be.
Described
As his elect, yes, and his beloved.
Which he probably was.
Yes, exactly.
The amazing writer Carlos Fuentes said that the role of the artist is to bear witness to history.
That's lovely, yes. And I think that's precisely what they have done. So here I've placed a painting of my husband's against this cosmic background to give the feeling of the intelligence and consciousness within the whole cosmos and within nature. It's as best I can do to sort of combine a human image with an archetypal image and against this starry background. I think the soul is something inconceivable and immeasurable to which we belong and in which we live, a great web of life that connects everything to everything else. And it is, like the Shekinah, the ground of our being. It is a living spiritual substance within us and all around us. And just as the individual soul pervades the whole human being, including everything within it, so the cosmic soul is present within everything, rather like salt in water. It pervades all of creation and is the unifying principle within our world. When we begin to change our consciousness by connecting in our imagination to this greater dimension of soul, we begin to change the fabric of life. We actually change the fabric of life. We change the relationship between the soul and matter as we know it. Life is pressing us to evolve out of our present state, and our conscious participation in this process of evolution actually assists life. There's a two-way relationship between ourselves and life as this ground, as it were. I want to recommend to you a book written by a Sufi sheikh in America, I'm sure you know him, Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. Anybody know him? Yeah? Well, he's just brought this out, and it's a collection of his essays, and it's repetitious for that reason, because he says it goes over and over the same material. It's called The Return of the Feminine and the World Soul. And that bit I just said about that we actually change the fabric of life itself, that comes out of this book. I haven't thought of that before, but it's an alchemical understanding that we actually can transform life. We have the power to do this through our consciousness.
What's his name?
Llewellyn, that's 2 L's, E-W-E, 2 L's again, Y-N, and then Vaughan Lee.
Very well.
He became a Sufi many years ago, and he now teaches in America. So I've done this little concoction of the heart inside this greater disk of wholeness, mind and heart reunited, against the background of light. And a couple of weeks ago I gave a talk for alternatives at St. James's Church, and I wish I'd brought with me the beautiful quotations of people who have actually experienced this light of the divine ground, because I think that you would be an audience who would appreciate and value that. I have them on the Dream of the Cosmos, but I can't remember exactly where. But anyway, what they say is that when they're in touch with this light, one of them was Gopi Krishna, who had the experience of the Kundalini rising in him. Has any of you read that book by Gopi Krishna? It came out about 20 years ago. Anyway, he says that no matter what state I'm in, I'm all the time within this light. It's just, it enhances my own consciousness, but it's there, as it were, the ground of my consciousness. And the other person is a man who wrote a wonderful book called Dark Night, Early Dawn.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Okay. Well, he's my second pin-up. Christopher Bache, B-A-C-H-E. And he had this experience, psychedelic experience, through what he called holotropic breathing, which was taught him by someone called Stanislav Grof. And through that he had extraordinary experiences which took him into the heart of this ground. It's something that we're capable of, but we have to wait until the right moment, can't force it. But anyway, he said that he was overwhelmed by the sense that this consciousness had waited 13 billion years before it could communicate with its creation. Very moving. And he was aware of the love which was this ground and the light that was the ground. I would advise you to get that book just for that passage, I think, in it. Dark Night, Early Dawn. So this is, I want to just convey to you the reality of this divine ground, the reality of the light and the love that's the ground of all of us, that we are all sparks of, if you like. And this is another quote from Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. He says, "Matter is spinning and dancing with the same love that radiates in and from our heart. The spinning of the heart and the spinning of atoms belong to the same outpouring of love." Beautifully expressed. That's in this book. So I'm ending with this. I've got 2 pictures, but this is the book, The Divine Feminine, that I wrote with Andrew Harvey, and we put that on the cover. It's by the same artist who did the Cyclops, Odilon Redon. But to me, it just stands for this gentle, compassionate beingness of the universe, really, which is there as the deep ground. And I have this beautiful quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, 1841 he wrote it. It's called The Oversoul. And he wrote, "We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist, and whose beatitude is all accessible to us, is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, But the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece, as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, of which these are shining parts, is the soul. Beautifully put, I think. Wonderful. So this was another image from Cecil Collins. So I think we should perhaps draw this day to an end. It's been a very pleasant experience for me to talk to you. I hope it hasn't been too much for you.
Thank you so much.